All right, everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Money Talks, Love Listens. I'm really excited about our guest today. We finally have somebody from Florida on. I feel like my cousin's on. But no, I feel like, we've done a lot of stuff with singles and relationships. And we've touched a little bit about, couples and kind of what it's like to be in this pandemic if you're in a committed relationship. But we haven't really talked about marriage. And I feel like that's really important. I know a lot of people are married. Jim, you're married. I have been married. I'm not married anymore. But I think it's important that, a lot of people who are married aren't really hearing kind of how to basically deal with a pandemic. And none of us have been around since the last one. So I feel this will be beneficial to everyone. So our guest today is Babita. Hi, Babita.
Hi.
So can you please let everyone know, I know what you do, but please let everyone know what you do, as well as, your core focus. I know that you're a psychotherapist, you're also a coach, and kind of how you got into this type of work.
Yes, sure. So thank you so much for the intro. I am a psychotherapist and a relationship coach. My focus is on the relationship to self and the relationship to others, whether personal or professional. And I ended up, this is my second career. I started off as a lawyer, and then I worked in corporate American consulting, and then on Wall Street as an executive. And so I did that for many years. And I just realized that I wasn't fulfilled. I was very successful, but something felt like it was missing. And as I started to think about what I wanted to do, I saw a therapist who handed me a bunch of books and said, have you thought about being a therapist? Because I was describing all the things that I really liked about the work I was doing. And so much of that work was around relationship work. At the same time, I was going through my own personal struggles in my marriage. And so that was another reason why I, sought out a therapist. And I just found the whole journey to be so helpful. And as I thought about the things that I really wanted to do, and I wanted to do something meaningful, and then my own personal journey, I decided I would go back to school and do all of my, training, and then, start my own practice. And so I started opening the door of psychotherapy. And then recently I opened up a Babita Spinelli group, which focuses on the consulting, mental health consulting for organizations, and the coaching side. And the psychotherapy practice is all psychotherapy. I do a lot of couples work.
That's amazing. I didn't know that you worked on Wall Street, Jim. I was like, what?
We'll talk.
This is going to be fun. Oh my God. I have to say this one thing, because my original major in college was law, and I took a psych class, and I switched my major because I had such a wonderful time because of that. So I'm kind of like, ooh, someone else did something like that.
Yes, completely. Yeah. It's so interesting. I loved law school. Being a lawyer, it's okay. I mean, it works out because when it's still legal skills that you have, and it sort of works out because I also do a lot of like co-parenting stuff and parent coordination, things of that nature, should the marriage not work. Yeah. But we're not going there today. We're working on the marriage working. Right. But it did come in handy.
Like, I can refer you to divorce attorney if this does not work.
Oh, wait. Wrong segment. No.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we are talking about marriages working together in the pandemic and hopefully thriving in the pandemic. So how can we effectively, if you are married or a married couple, effectively communicate right now? I feel a lot of people who've been, I don't want to say stuck together, but at this point, I feel like we are able to get out of our house now. So we're able, we've been in this pandemic for long enough, but I feel sometimes the communication skills are kind of lacking. And now everyone's doing virtual stuff or texting. It's harder to get people on the phone and actually call them, let alone if you're seeing each other every day. It's just like, hey, good talk. And then there's nothing else to say. How do we improve that? Because that gets kind of boring.
Yes, it's like Groundhog Days and, over and over again, right, in the relationship world. And so I definitely say, even though things are opening up, I still feel like the pandemic under the pandemic is what's, been going on in terms of marriages and their struggles. It has been a real pressure cooker. So there's a lot to say here, but I'll start off with a few gems that I think are important and I think have worked with couples that have come in and said, help. The first one is this, and you might be a little bit surprised, but I always say, because you could have too much of a good thing by being together all the time and everybody's remote, I have suggested that it's okay to give yourself permission to think about your individual needs and share that with each other. And I call it, go into your individual backpack of stuff and then express to the other person what you need and let them express that to you. And it's okay if those needs might mean that you're doing something individually or separately, because you can always circle back to each other after, let's say you need a night where you're sitting in your tub reading a book, or someone else might need to just watch something or maybe go for a bike ride. And it doesn't mean it's a bad relationship. It just means you're being respectful, that you have some individual care that needs to take place. So it's okay to go into your individual self-care, and then you could circle back to each other and actually even share it, or you might even feel a little bit less stressed out because you've created that individual recharge. So that's tip number one. The second one is the communication piece. I think it goes like this. Are we trying to communicate with each other when it's not a good time? And there's a lot of not a good time going on in the pandemic, right? So it really means being a little bit more intentional and proactive around when that time is. If, for example, someone is really anxious or feeling depleted, or they've just literally worked a 10-hour day, it may not be such a good time right after they shut their laptop. You may want to wait. So I say, you know what, create a State of the Union and pick a time on your calendar and say, how about we take a break at this time? Or how about on hump day, Wednesday, 7:00, you and me, right? We're going to sit down, let's talk, let's figure out what's going on. So reset that those ad hoc conversations and communications may not always work. And if you need to talk about some really important things, like let's say you have kids and there's so much going on and you're stressed out, you feel really grounded when you've planned the time you're going to communicate. And again, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the relationship. It just means we are resetting our expectations of each other right now, because we've been going through this lockdown, and we're going through remote work, and our kids are remote, or whatever your situation is, and we're just being thoughtful and more planful about it.
Right.
And that kind of goes to number 3, which is, remember that each of you are not the same people as the pre-pandemic people. Let's face it, our mental health has taken a toll. We have been through a lot. We're all grieving. We've been through some difficult times. Sometimes there have been some gems. So I don't want to discount that. For many people, they've actually really been like, wow, we've learned so much about each other. We found a lot of strength. So there is that too. But we want to reset that the way we used to operate may not be what we need right now.
Okay.
So we may not have the same external stimuli. So reset your expectations. And last but not least, and maybe I'll just pause there and we can all, talk about some of this stuff. is I've said it's okay to also pick something new that you both need to do with each other. Things can feel stale. So
Yeah.
you are going to kind of go into your creative box, and it may literally be something like this. Why don't we turn on Masterclass and learn how to cook Thai food? You know, like you may literally need to be thinking of something different. I have couples that literally are suddenly, they're both learning to knit. They're like, we've never done this before. And it's hilarious. So it's okay to think out of the box.
Right.
And I also say, put things in an empty jar. Each of you pick 5 or 6 things that you think are fun. Put it in a jar, and you're going to pick one thing that Friday. And whatever it is, you got to do it.
Ooh,
So
I like that.
Awesome.
things.
I could get you in trouble. It's like, like you're cleaning the whole week, or you're making dinner for the entire week. Oh my god.
Your significant others are not going to want to talk to me after this, right? But it has worked. It has worked, right?
Last night I played Would You Rather with my partner. And first of all, this is the adult version of Would You Rather. And I was just like, he was like, where are you getting these questions from? And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't write this book. But just based upon his answers, like I've obviously been with him for years, but I was surprised by some of the stuff he said. And I was just like, where is this coming from? So I guess it's kind of like what you said before. We are different than from when the pandemic obviously began to, I can't believe it's been a year. That sounds crazy to even say that. And I almost feel like, I don't want to say we lost a year, but I mean, I feel like I lost a year. So I'm now like, okay, I gave a year. That's all you get. Like I made a commitment that it was going to last for years. That's it. I'm not going to continue doing this for another year. So I kind of that, you aren't the same person. Jim,
you're not the same person.
That's interesting. Davida, that's well said. I didn't really think about the grieving process. That's an interesting concept. I know in relationships, at least for me, in ours, I take a lot of walks. Yes. My dog is in the best shape she's ever been. But I agree with you that it's you need your alone time. But I never really thought about the grieving side of that. That's interesting. That's an interesting concept, because you're all right. This is a new world it's a different world for us right now because of everything we're going through.
Yeah, there's been like a lot of loss, and for each partner in the relationship, they've had their own set of losses, and then the relationship often feels like they've had a loss. So you've got the collective loss, then you've got the individual loss, and it could also be some things that are, really small, but still a loss. Sort of little things, like if someone really enjoyed how they would go into the office, they'd get their coffee from their Starbucks. Like those things are still losses. Then you also have the loss that the relationship has had. Maybe they were people that they used to see that they haven't seen. There were ways that they used to do things with each other that don't, that they, the restaurant they used to go to is shut down. I mean, these are the things, for my clients in New York. And as you know, I'm like a New Yorker. There's a lot of like things that they feel small, but they're actual losses. And then we have the bigger losses, right? The really big losses, job furloughs. People have passed away. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened.
Yeah, that's good.
So what's your number one tip for people who are married to, I want to say, improve their relationship moving forward? Because I feel we're hopefully in another 6 months. I am not Dr. Fauci or any scientist, so don't take my words on that. But hopefully after 6 months, we are somewhat headed towards post-pandemic life. So once we're fully out of this, what do we do? How can we improve our relationship?
Yes. The first thing I do want to bring up, which is really important, that's coming up for a lot of couples, is their version of reentry anxiety is a big thing that's happening. And that each of them have their own experience around how to reenter into post-COVID world. So the first thing I would just say is I would spend some time sitting down with each other and actually talking about how they would imagine or envision like reentry. what are their feelings that are coming up? You would be surprised at what is going to go on in your partner's head about it.
Yeah.
The second part would be this: once you sort of do that, maybe to really start to think about what might be something we really missed that we can do together as we go back in, that we had lost for a while, that we want to say that we really want to do. And let's do that together. Let's plan for it. Who might we even feel safe that we can now want to see, as well? The bigger picture is this: how do we want to continue to keep our connection going? So it goes back to almost getting to know each other again in like this new phase. So I suggest it's co-created. Think about the plan together. Do we want to try and reinstill a Saturday date night? What do we want to claim? What do we want to let go? What do we want that's new? So the 3 questions that I think you should ask yourself in your relationship is sit down with each other and say, what do we want to claim from 2020, the pandemic time, in terms of our relationship? What was something that was actually good? So for some couples, they were like, it was kind of nice that we actually walked and spent time with each other. We kind of slowed down. What do you want to let go of? What was something that didn't work, that was really stressful, that you're like, we don't want that again. We actually didn't handle that particular conflict so well. We could have done that better. We don't want to bring it in. What do we want to reclaim pre-pandemic? And that goes back to what were the things that brought us joy? So that would be some of the things that I think, if we look at it from the pandemic lens for relationships, post some of my things that I think would be important. The next one, I think, just an overall tip, I think, for couples: how do we want to negotiate conflict moving forward? What can we do better in negotiating conflict? What were the things that came up? And maybe this is a good time to say, do we need to sit? If we didn't see a couples coach or therapist before, do we need to sit with somebody? Do we need to think about what we didn't do well? And how do we want to make sure that we negotiate conflict moving forward? Let's pull out some tools and tricks and use them.
Yeah.
Jim?
That's well said. Wow, that's well said. I mean, I can say that in my business, when I'm meeting with people, conflict comes up a lot, because money and relationships, that's always a part of it. So that's interesting. Do you think that we will ever revert back to pre-COVID, or do you think this is just going to grow and develop going forward, the way we run our day-to-days?
Interesting question. I don't think we'll fully ever capture the pre-COVID, because I think, just from my lens, as a psychotherapist, that there is something that's changed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's necessarily negative. But I do think that we've all learned something, whether it's the amount of resilience that we didn't know that we had, whether it's clarity about how we see ourselves, whether it's recognizing that maybe this isn't the job we want to do the rest of our lives. Maybe it's a different way that we want to see life in terms of quality of life, or how we really want to see our relationship and our work. But I do think that it's something that can be really used in a really powerful, positive way. So if we're we're not going to be the same as pre, but maybe we can actually come in even stronger.
Okay, that's good. Well, I had a couple questions that I'd like to go through. I mean, that was just off the hip, so thank you for answering that. I like meeting professionals that go through a similar process with their clientele that I go through with my clientele. And I looked at your website. I love your website. I thought
Thank you.
You're welcome. The format and the flow looked great. And one common theme that I really liked is that you like to make sure that people are comfortable in going through the process and the communication and all of that. How do you do that? What is your process and what is your flow to get people or couples to really open up to you, to really share what's most important, and really help articulate, how some goals they may have and how they want to achieve those goals?
What a great question, because I think that there can be a lot of fears or apprehension around the space. At the end of the day, you're coming in front of someone and then you're like supposed to share all of these things that are very vulnerable, and identify, all of these issues or emotions. So the first thing that I really like to do to make couples feel comfortable is, first, I really like to just sort of help them I like to normalize the process. I like to be able to say, this is your time, and that, that our goal is really co-created, that we're all kind of working through all of these things together. And that what we really want to do is kind of look at how we want to transform your relationship, but we're going to do it one step at a time. And remember that this is your process, and I'm with you in it. I also like to be able to just start off with a little bit of them sharing, like, if this were to be successful, if this were to be something that they would like to, how do they envision it would look? What would it look like? What would your relationship look like if we worked through all of these things? What would it feel like? How would you feel? And then after that, what I like to do is what I call the fondness and admiration. I do like to lean in with the positive so that couples start to feel comfortable, because a lot of times some of the fear is that they're going to go into a couple session and they're already a little apprehensive, and that all this bad stuff is going to come out and that it's going to be worse, right? You've heard that.
Sure.
So I do want to be able to lean into what I call some of the gems, like start to tell me about let's say it's a married couple, your marriage story. Let's write some things down that you think are fondness and admiration about, your partner. Let's sort of start there. So that's sort of just the overall thing. That happens when they sort of like come into session. Jim, to answer, like, if there was something I like to do a consult.
Yeah.
And I really just like to answer all of their questions. I like to be able to say, this is the process. Everyone is unique. What are your needs and wants? It's important that you feel comfortable. What do you think is your hot ticket item? Let's say it's financial infidelity, right? We know that exists. I call financial. Let's say there's been betrayal around debt.
Yeah.
Or things around money, right? So then that's a difficult topic. It can be a shaming topic. So I try to be able to, they might say, this is what's coming up. And I'm like, okay, remember, we are going to unpack this and work through it so that both of you feel seen and heard. And then we're going to figure out what we do next.
Mm-hmm.
So those are just some of the ways that I think I try and help couples to feel comfortable.
That's great. Your voice is very soothing, so I can see how this would run smoothly. So,
thank you.
And you actually started talking about, money and debt. As a financial advisor in Chicago, it's interesting. I talk all the time about money and debt, and about plans and how to help hedge against risks and how to build up portfolios for your future. One of the things that comes up a lot, and this has actually come up more this past year than in the past, was debt. Well, is debt. That debt does have an evil stigma by it, and I'd like to get your opinion on that. I mean, when you talk to couples and you are walking through your process, when the topic of finance or assets or liabilities or any kind of expenses, how do you manage that with a couple? Because there's usually a stronger person or a more opinionated person in a relationship than someone else. When I meet with someone, there's someone that usually is directing the meeting versus someone who's receiving the meeting. And it's interesting to hear how you manage that flow.
Yes, thank you. So I like to use a technique, a lot of techniques from Gottman methodology, which is very tool oriented. So before we get into anything, so let me just set the stage. I've introduced, before we talk about any issues related to money or anything else, a tool on how we're going to talk about things. One person is great listener, and they're actively listening without thinking about what they're going to say. And the other person is going to be describing their subjective experience with their feelings first, and then they're going to pause. Great listener snapshots what they're saying, and then there's a pause, and then we kind of take it from there, and I navigate that. So the first thing with any issue, and I think especially when it comes to something like money, is remembering the tool and saying, before we talk about anything, we're going to take out our tool. I literally hand them something, or they have it, or I've emailed it to them. This is how we're going to talk about it. The second part is when it comes to money. I actually wrote an article on this, the relationship to money, marriage and money. Our histories play such a part. Our family history plays such a part on our lens around money. So for some individuals, let's say they've come from a space of deprivation, one's come from a space of abundance. Let's say one has come from trauma around money where there's been bankruptcy in the family. Let's say somebody else has come from maybe a Holocaust survivors, right? So then there's his own trauma, and then we come into that space of like, is everything going to just go away? How do we survive this? All of those money issues are what's been modeled by their parents or generationally is what these two people come in with. Then they've been operating like that in their life. So let's say they have that, they've been single, they've accumulated debt, or let's say that they've one person pays bills easily, one person doesn't. There's all sorts of that stuff that they come in with. And then they end up getting married and they are sitting like something's gone wrong, right? So I like to talk about what is their history around money, what is their lens around money, what is their relationship around money, and then we get into what has been coming up. How does one person see it then? How does the other? But their light bulbs are already going on when they think about their history and their relationship to money. Then we talk about the practical stuff. For example, let's look at some things operationally. Maybe it does also mean a lot of times, do you see a financial planner? Have you sat down and gotten clear about your money? Let's process your fears about getting clear about your money. Yeah. Where do each of you land? Are you looking at your balances? What are the fears around that? What exists? Who's been normally doing it? Do you like that role? Right? Yeah. Are you both sitting down every week and looking at this? Are you prioritizing what bills are being paid? I mean, I know I'm putting a lot out there, but those are just some of the things that we work through it first psychologically, then practically. And we literally have tools. Every week, we're going to have money talks. Yeah. You're going to go in, you're going to have your spreadsheets. I've had couples literally come in with spreadsheets talking about how they're working through it, the stuff around the money. And then we say, okay, do you need to get some additional advice now, right? Yeah. And then they lean into getting a financial advisor. But communication, facing fears, co-creation, and realizing that if they can go through each of those steps and set that up every week, they will get through it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you ever have to put your attorney hat on when they start talking about this?
Yes, yeah, okay. I do. Actually, I do. It's interesting because sometimes I do have to say, like, can we talk a little? Let's call a spade a spade. Like, what's our liability here? Yeah. Let's really talk about some of the stuff around liability. Let's talk about stuff. If there's a couple that says that's it, we are getting divorced. I cannot stand this money stuff. This has been going on forever, right? So then we talk about, okay, let's pause for a moment and look at it. Is it only money that's the issue? Do you know how much money is going to cost you to get divorced? Let's just pause and try to figure out how we can work through this. And a lot of times, and Jim, you may have found this too, but a lot of times I think when things feel more clear and people feel like they have a plan, though some of that anxiety, right, the fear and anxiety starts to diminish. It's just that there's a lot of fear to look at it. And there's a lot of anger. If they, if someone feels like they've come in and they're managing their debt and then they have a partner who's hidden it, the betrayal and the anger, but then you have to really look at all of that collectively and help to build the trust between them too.
Yeah, that's right. That's excellent. Thank you.
This has been a wonderful conversation. I hope everybody's taking notes today. And how I know that we have to wrap up because we're almost getting close to the end time. So, Babita, where can people contact you if they are a couple and maybe they need some guidance or just need somebody to talk to? Everybody needs somebody to talk to. So, for those people that are a little, freaked out about therapy, I feel like everybody needs therapy. So, please.
Yeah, I love it. I love therapy.
Yes.
So I say they can go to my website, openingthedoorspsychotherapy.com or babitaspinelligroup.com. I've got like a contact form there for anyone to fill out. I love the good old-fashioned phone call. My phone number is everywhere. And I do like to be able to speak to somebody on the phone and give them some, some kind of comfort. They're just starting the process and they can feel a little, hesitant. But some people do like to fill out like the form because it kind of like it's a nice way to start at first as well. I am on social media because I do like to put out some valuable content. So sometimes for some individuals, they like to, go onto that platform and then reach out. So those are a lot of ways to reach out to me.
Perfect. And all this information will be on the replay. So if you're watching on Facebook, I will be sure to link Babita's website as well as her social media. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be replayed there, as well as on Instagram, basically every platform.
All there. Did we miss anything? Twitter?
No Snapchat. That's the only one we don't have. Sorry for snappers or whatever Snapchat people are called.
Yeah. Whatever you're using, you'll find it, right?
Jim, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Babita, that was fantastic. I know our listeners and me included, I learned a lot from what you said. I can see why you're very successful at your career. It's very exciting to be a part of. From a business perspective, we have our firm THG has a webinar on the 24th that's focused solely around retirement planning for business owners. It's a way for business owners to set up and to maximize as many tax deductible and tax deferred or tax-free plans out there. So if anyone's a business owner, I would recommend listening into that webinar because it's going to be very enlightening.
Oh, I'm going to listen on that. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
might have to listen to that. I need some tax information.
Excellent.
Yes.
So that link, that information will also be linked as well on all of the replays, as well as if you want to contact Jim for any financial advice, whether you're a business owner or you're an individual. Thank you, Babita, so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so great to be here.
It was great. Thank you.
And we will be back next time with another guest. So hope you guys have a great week.
All right, take care.